Hey guys, this is Nick Plessas with EGM Now. I'm here with Mike Goroff. We're checking out Assassin's Creed Origins. I got a look at the Gamescom demo.
So this is what they're making available at Gamescom.
Yes,
right
this is the demo. I think attendees are getting to play. I'm not sure if there's going to be hands-on or not. But yeah, it's a pretty big demo. It includes one story mission, I think one side quest, and then a reasonably sized city to explore. So right here, I started out, I didn't really know what I was doing. I traveled over to this little docking from a boat, got out of my boat, and then I just jumped in. I have no idea what's going on. I'm swinging randomly, basically just learning the controls at this point.
This is basically my entire experience with Assassin's Creed every time I play these games.
Yeah, it's tricky because this one, the controls are completely, particularly for combat, the controls have been completely reworked since previous games. On top of the fact that I just haven't played an Assassin's Creed in a couple of years, those two things together, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was literally just mashing buttons at this point. And I'm using some kind of massive club, which is a completely different fighting style than what most people are used to in Assassin's Creed games.
It looks pretty awesome.
It is.
You can really see the weight to the weapon.
Yeah, so there's like every weapon has a light attack and a heavy attack. And this one, they feel generally similar because it's just a heavy weapon.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm just doing the light attack, just bonking them on the head, and I do a heavy attack. It's like a ground slam. And it's super high damage, but obviously really slow. So yeah, just doing some loot, just trying to get my bearings at this point. It's still pretty fresh to me.
Is this the free roam? Are you just like free roaming right now, or did they give you a mission when you were playing the demo?
So yeah, I was dropped into the demo with nothing, no missions. No, I take that back. There is an active story mission at the moment, but that's not what I was doing at that point. At that point, I was just exploring, trying to figure out what the hell was going on.
Cool, because you haven't played this. You didn't play this.
Memphis. It is beautiful, but it stinks of the battlefield or a tomb.
Like previous Assassin's Creed games, in terms of like you just hold the run button and then walk towards stuff and you'll.
There would be like a standard run, then there'd be the sprint, and then there'd be a jump and a climb, kind of. There was like a lot of different buttons, and then as they got later in the series, they streamlined it a bit, where it was just like walk and then the sort of platform button. And from what I can tell, that is the situation here. It's essentially one button that makes you run fast, and if you run into something that's platformable, you will platform on it.
Okay, so it is sort of like they kept that, because they've been talking about how they're sort of reworking the Assassin's Creed formula a lot.
Right.
That's been sort of their like main narrative while they're promoting the game. But it looks like combat, it's more in terms of combat than in terms of like the actual free running and
combat is entirely different. I actually sat down with the game director to talk about combat. But yeah, as far as the platform goes, from what I can tell, it's very the same. Just one button will get you where you need to go, climb, jump, whatever. And so here I'm talking to this little kid. What just happened was I was running along the street earlier, and I heard thief, thief, just someone calling out, and then I see this kid running, and it seemed pretty organic, like nothing made me chase him, but I was like, I'm gonna see what happens when I chase this kid.
For sure.
So I chase him, and he leads me to these thieves, and now he's talking about how, oh, thanks for killing them, like they were bad people, like they had me kidnapped, blah blah blah. And what's interesting about that is I don't know. I assume this is the side quest that they told us was available in the mission, but I don't know if this would have happened if I entered the map from a different area, or if I would have had to come to this general area to experience this, or what would happen if I completely ignored him and just sort of went on my way. Because now it's starting this whole sequence of events that might not be essential to the story, but still seems pretty significant.
Yeah, because at first it just seemed like an environmental, and maybe you beat up all the guys and the kid gives you like an apple or something.
Yeah.
But it actually turns into like a pretty how involved is this side quest? Is it?
It's like a multi-stage mission that incorporates several different like gameplay elements. Like coming up, I'm going to do like an investigative type thing, and then there's like a combat stealth area, and yada yada. I didn't actually see it all the way through because for the sake of time, I wanted to make sure I got the entirety of the main quest. So I abandoned it, I think, like 3/4 of the way through. But it's pretty significant, and it'll be interesting to see if it would have actually ended up tying into the the main game at
Seems
some point.
pretty involved, like Witcher 3's, like the monster hunts and stuff like that.
Right.
How those are multi-stage. They're basically just side quests, but they're multi-stage quests that actually feel like complete narratives on their own.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it'll be interesting to see if these side quests have that same. It sounds like they will, but it'll be interesting to see if they have that same sort of depth to them.
Yeah. And one thing a little from earlier that was kind of interesting is you saw that go from day to night all of a sudden, or suddenly. I hate the phrase all of a sudden. And the weird thing is that I actually initiated that. It was a button press. I think it was like the select, or it was holding something down. I don't remember the exact prompt, but it was weird because I don't know what that served. I wonder if that comes into gameplay in some way where it's like, hey, you can't talk to this person unless it's daytime, or you can't activate this mission unless it's nighttime.
Well, I know they've been talking a lot about how each of the AI, like the NPCs, are sort of programmed to have schedules, like the same thing that they did in like Deadly Premonition,
right?
Or like in Zelda, they do a very simplified version of that, but where they're following their paths and their schedules. So, I think that. And I do remember them saying at some point that day and night would have a pretty significant effect on like where you'd find people, where you'd be able to get in without being spotted, stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, I wonder if it can end up like impeding you in some way.
Yeah.
So right here, I started this sort of investigative section of the side quest. That kid told me some information. Basically, kids are being kidnapped at this dock. I'm trying to figure out why. And there's like a bunch of little clues. It seems pretty basic. So you have this I believe it's called a animus pulse, I think they call it, where you just hold a button down and it sends out this pretty generic, just like radar pulse from you. It marks key things you can look at. Normally this is just for treasure, but when you're doing in one of these investigative scenarios, it tells you things to investigate.
So there's still sort of like sci-fi-ish type elements. Like they're still using the animus to describe or to like explain some of the video game tropes that they're that they're using.
As far as I can remember, they have confirmed that there is some connection to modern day in this. So yeah, it seems that someone's still in the animus, still controlling this guy. Because you have these kind of weird functions that apply to the sci-fi element of it. But yeah, as far as the so you just saw I did that little pulse just to see what else I can investigate. And so as far as these investigative scenarios go, they don't seem super involved. It's basically go where we tell you to go and learn story. Hit button, find thing, learn something. But generally these kind of sequences just tend to serve a more narrative, element. Just like, hey, like learn about what's going on here without, kind of like a break, a lull in the action.
Yeah, like right here, he's finding out that it was arson.
Right, exactly. And then so I find oil, and then there's this oil guy right outside the ship. Like you put two and two together, which to be fair, took me longer than it probably should have.
Well, I mean that's like it. Did it tell you to find the oil guy, or did you have to think like, oh, there's an oil guy, so I should go talk to him?
So that it's interesting that you say that, because that was the exact thing that threw me off. Was I was prompted to investigate all these very specific locations, after doing my animus pulse, but nothing necessarily prompted me to talk to this guy. Now, when I first got to this area, you can see me totally confused, trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing. When I first
freaking everyone out, at this
point, I'm just practicing controls. So I I first got to this area, and before I even started investigating, or like right after I started investigating, I talked to that guy just to see what he had to say.
Right.
And then I went on with my investigation, and
He was like, "Well, I'm the oil guy. Don't forget that I got oil.
Right.
You're gonna want to
That was the
remember
thing.
that."
Is that I was prompted. I was very deliberately prompted to investigate all these things. But after I investigated everything and I needed to talk to him, it wasn't super clear that I needed to talk to him again. You
Right.
know. So I was kind of running around like, what exactly am I supposed to be doing? But eventually I figured it out.
And it changed based on the fact that you found the oil.
Right.
And then it
Yeah,
prompted
he
that.
had 2 different lines to tell me depending on whether or not I had progressed that
That's
part of the
pretty cool.
investigation.
That's pretty cool.
Oh, and right here was another thing that confused me. It was like I would talk to him and he'd be like, "Oh, I have nothing to say to you." And so I'm like, "What am I supposed to do?" And then just through trial and error, I figure out that I'm supposed to smash these oil pots to piss him off.
That's kind of cool. Like, so there's an element of like puzzle solving that I don't really think was really present in the other Assassin's Creed games.
Right. It's interesting because I think it benefits the game, but what's kind of weird about it is that it goes so drastically between just leading you by the nose and then having you actually think for yourself, you know? So you are led by the nose through this whole sequence of investigation, and then you hit this point where it's like, okay, what are you supposed to do next? You're like, oh, am I supposed to be thinking now? I wasn't aware we switched tracks,
Right.
you know?
So what's going on here?
So seems like a kind of like an animus reconstruction. It's
Yeah.
I think it's supposed to serve, be like a surrogate for Bayek's, I believe that's his name, Bayek's memory. Or not memory,
like
but just
imagination.
like imagination, exactly. Where you're sort of just figuring out. So what this ends up leading me to is that I actually have to go all the way back to the ship that I
That you attacked.
first started.
Yeah.
So for the sake of time, I went and just skipped that. I skipped ahead in this part because I had been at that ship and already cleared out all the enemies. So yeah. So disregarding that, we have alligators. So there was a kid on the ship, blah blah blah, but alligators. So yeah, I was running to the main objective and stomped on an alligator.
Yeah.
And now it hunts you for a long ass time.
That's cool.
You could see I was running for
Wow,
a
he's
while
pretty
and he's
fast,
still
huh?
on me. Yeah, they're pretty agile. I don't know a lot about alligators, but
That's
I mean,
cool.
damn.
I haven't actually seen this before.
Yeah. So, and I believe my luck goes further south pretty quick because so you can fight them just like you normally would, and just hack them to pieces.
Smacking it with a sword.
Yeah, and then you get some loot from it, and I think and so here come like 2 or 3 more.
Wow.
And
Were they attracted by like you fighting the other alligator?
That's a good question. I don't know if they just have like a sort of zone of influence where it's like if you trespass, they come after you.
Or maybe you just ran past another one without.
Right. Yeah.
noticing.
Yeah. It could be anything, and I think even 1 or 2 more come. Maybe not. Maybe that was a later part in the demo. But yeah. So there are alligators. There's apparently a wide variety of wildlife.
Yeah.
There are vultures, I think, that can attack you. I saw some of those.
Like Far Cry style.
Yeah, I don't know if it's quite to that extent, and I don't know how beneficial hunting them is, but they are there and they do play a part. So this is I think his name is Cebu, your little eagle, which basically just operates as like a
drone.
conventional drone function where you just send them out, used to mark targets and find where you need to go.
Yeah.
In a couple instances, I couldn't even continue. Like, even if I knew exactly where I needed to be, I couldn't continue until I marked it with Cebu, which I found kind of strange.
Is that just because for the sake of the demo, or do you think that's going to be like that in the final game? Like they wanted you to use him.
Right. That's an interesting point. I couldn't really say, but if it is in the final game, it is kind of strange that they don't let you just handle it more organically.
Yeah, because a lot of this game seems to be about approaching things in a way that you want, or sort of just about the freedom and the more organic nature of this one compared to other Assassin's Creeds. But yeah, it seems weird that they'd like make you do something.
Yeah,
like
even
that.
if you know exactly where you're going.
Yeah.
Another big help of Cebu is, or another useful tool in Cebu's arsenal is the ability to mark enemies. Now, as far as I could tell, and this was from my very limited chance to really get into the controls, I don't think you personally have a marking ability. I don't think you can look at a person and mark them. I could be totally wrong on that. But from what I could tell, you don't. And you actually, if you want to mark, if you want to mark everyone in an area, you need to use Cebu. which is like for a stealth game that's integral. Knowing where enemies are in relation to you. So this is where I'm first kind of experimenting poorly with the stealth element. Trying to figure out how to get upper hand on this guy. Speaking of stealth, one huge thing that I talked to the director about was this is one of the only Assassin's Creed games that actually has a dedicated crouch function. So other Assassin's Creed games, it would be all about environmental manipulation, right? Like there are weeds and you can only be stealthy in those weeds, or there's a corner.
Like you would automatically
you'd automatically go stealth mode. Or there'd be like a corner you could kind of like go up against and peek around. But this has a crouch element which makes you, like so many other games, makes you just generally stealthier. Nice and pre-animated takedown there. Makes you generally stealthier while you're in that mode. So it gives you a lot more control over your stealth, which I think is a huge thing. I've always hated how rigid my stealth capacity was in previous games. Like it was just limited to what the environment allowed. Whereas this is like you actually have to so now the crouching is super helpful because it's just
you're just ducking behind that.
It's just a rational line of sight system.
It seems like it's a lot like with the combat where it's giving more control to the player.
Right. Yeah. It's less
these things that players have had control over in series for so long already, but now it's finally making its way to these games, which is it's definitely an improvement.
They get rid of the the scripted nature of it to just give more control back to the player. And I think that absolutely works in the game's favor.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So that was like almost what we just kind of skipped over there was almost the conclusion of that side quest. She wanted me to follow her to go fight someone. And I was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll go, and then totally ignored her because I wanted to get on the main quest.
But you didn't fail the side quest just because you left, right? Like
no, so
you can go back. Like ideally, you could go back if you wanted to and finish the quest.
Right. As far as I know, it just puts like a new mission marker on my map.
Yeah.
So I can go. Find it on my own time.
Yeah.
Now at this point, I was very confused because at one point earlier, I had apparently unbeknownst to me, I had deactivated the marker for the main mission. So I didn't know where I was going. I was thinking that these eagle symbols were the main mission, but they are, like they had been in past games, and I should have remembered this, they are eagle vision points, whatever the little places where you can learn more of the map.
Yeah, like and mark like objectives. Yeah,
I'm forgetting they have a specific name that I can't remember right now. So this is where I'm spending my time traveling over there, kind of getting a hang of the platforming. And
so do they still have that whole mechanic where you have to climb the towers and get to the top of the
towers? So yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to. Yeah, it's
okay.
like one of those things where it's like it's a little piece of wood sticking out. You go sit on it, hit a button that marks a section of the map, tells you what's there. Like you'll see up there a whole bunch of, on my kind of radar situation at the top of the screen, a whole bunch of question marks.
Right.
If you go and do the eagle nest point or whatever it's called for a specific area, it'll tell you what those question marks are in the area.
Gotcha.
And that's something I always used to do in Assassin's Creed. As soon as I open up a new region, I would do the eagle points as quickly as possible because I hate like not knowing where I am and what the situation is.
I think a lot of players are like that.
Yeah.
I thought they didn't have that mechanic, so that's kind of interesting
in like more recent installments or specifically in
this one.
Right, yeah. No, yeah, it's back. I
mean, a good tour of the environments.
Though, I do definitely awesome. Get around, and they do. Like they're pretty crazy. One thing I noticed that I found kind of interesting is that unlike, for example, Uncharted, which I've been playing a lot of lately, the climbable, the like more interactable, not platforms, but like spots on a wall. Are a lot less discernible than in other games. It's like you will be looking at like that wall right there. That was all artwork that I just climbed, and I wouldn't have normally thought I could climb that, but I just tried it for the hell of it, and I could. And so the platforming seems really flexible, almost to the extent that you don't even realize how flexible it is.
Right. Well, especially if you're used to these games. Like for me, I've been finally playing through Breath of the Wild, so it's like
where you can just climb literally anything.
And if I'm playing a game now where I can't climb anything or everything, then I get sort of like
Right.
annoyed
Yeah.
now. Like that game has ruined traveling in an open world for it's ruined it forever.
Yeah, that's tragic.
But it's like nice to see that this is a little bit more like, hey, if you can see it and it looks like something you can climb, then you should definitely try to climb it because you might be able to.
Right. Yeah, it's less like walking down a vertical hallway, you know, whereas you have something like Uncharted, while it's very like beautiful, you know, it has like, it is a spectacle, it's very linear in where you're supposed to be going, you know, whereas this, it's a lot more open.
So this is cool here too.
So yes, this is where I started the story mission, that I finally figured out where I was supposed to go. In front of the canoe is Bayek's wife, who, according to developers, plays a huge part in the campaign. You are part of this organization, I believe. I'm blanking. I think they're called Maydex. I could be butchering that horribly. But so you're part of this organization similar to the Assassins, but you know, kind of about like maintaining peace in the world, blah blah blah. And your wife is kind of on her own spiritual political path in her life, you know. And so you guys
she's not part of the group.
She's not part of your group, and the developers talked about how while you guys are teammates, you know, through thick and thin, like that, your sort of your variation in life choices will eventually come into play in certain ways.
Gotcha.
So at this point, we are going to investigate. It seems like kind of a silly, meaningless main mission. We're going to investigate why the ritual bull. So like this queen or this king keeps like a bull, like that they like in like this glory, like luxurious place because they worship him, and you know, yada yada. And he's been poisoned. The bull's been poisoned, and we're going to investigate, you know, what the deal is. And throughout this point, we also learn about, you know, we learn more about like their relationship. We learn more about the political strife currently going on in the region between Cleopatra and the boy king, whose name is some very Egyptian name that I can't remember, starts with a P.
So they are tying into history pretty real, or not realistically at least, but at least there are like actual historical
references. Yeah, it'll be interesting because they do. They incorporate stories of Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, their relationship, and then their relationship with the boy king, who's like the 13-year-old king right now, and how that all works. And I don't know enough personally about history to claim whether or not it's accurate, you know. But they seem to be following it. Yeah, you know, why not, right? Who's gonna check? They seem to be, you know, it seems to have some kind of historical significance, right? I would be surprised if it was really just the names, you know. So yeah, this is me, just like another little investigative scenario where I'm just sort of trying to figure out why the bull is sick. And yeah, and I don't know how much. My demo was relatively short, and having two of these in the short time I played maybe isn't great, you know. It could have been just how I played, because I don't know how much these add, you know. Like, hopefully they're not, you know, excruciatingly frequent, because they're sort of just like, you know, go here, kind of thing. And then you have to rifle through dung, bull dung. But this, you know, this was a relatively short one, which just kind of adds.
See, this is when games need like smell-o-vision.
Smell-o-vision?
Yeah, that's when they really get you back.
Yeah, with the bull dung.
What did things smell like back in ancient Egypt when you're digging through bull crap, literal bull crap?
Yeah, it's a super big world, you know. This was made by the same studio that made I'm blanking right now, Black Flag.
Oh, okay.
You know, which is in a lot of ways one of the, you know, definitely one of the most highly rated of the Assassin's Creed, at least in recent times. And they seem to be, you know, it's a pretty extensive situation. So yeah, just more investigative stuff. This was kind of weird. Like, I didn't really get. Now, the only reason I was so quick to realize that needed to be shot down was because I heard
do it earlier. Or?
No, because I heard a fellow demo player get told that by the developers. That would have taken me a very long time to figure out.
Could you have like swung at it with your sword? Or?
I assume it just takes damage.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was like that was another kind of example of one of those things where it's like, okay, I suddenly have to think for myself for a second, you know?
Well, yeah, you're so not used to being able to even do that in a lot of games.
Right, yeah.
You know, if you see a door and it's locked, and then usually I will swing at it with
Right,
whatever,
just
or shoot at it,
impulsively,
just to be
yeah.
like, whatever, but it never works. So
Right.
it's kind of interesting that they're doing stuff like that. It's just like a small trope that they're flipping on its head, but they're
Yeah.
still kind of undermining a lot of the stupider video game tropes that you see a lot of
Right.
times that are overused.
So right there, we just skip past a sequence where, well, like a skip past a cinematic where we learn that those two girls we were talking to, they're priestesses working for the king, but they're the ones guilty of poisoning the bull. But it's because a group of evil people have kidnapped their brother, and they want the bull dead. So I just got sent on a mission to save the brother, who's conveniently like 20 feet away. But you know, is what it is. It's a video game, I guess.
Yeah, but
And
they
so I'm
can't
kind of on
swim.
mission for that.
How are they going to swim across that?
I'm pretty sure there was a bridge back there that I overtly did not use. But, okay, so here's Cebu again, me just like, and I really hope I'm getting his name right, because I'm going to look like a jackass if I'm not, but I think it's Cebu. Doing my little marking situation.
How was like controlling him?
It's really straightforward. I couldn't tell if you control his elevation or if it's locked a certain distance above the ground, you know?
Yeah. Like above the highest point.
Right, yeah. So, it doesn't seem like you ever have to do anything dexterous with him, though. You know, it's sort of just mark, you know? Just mark and get on your way. Okay, so in here we got a whole ton of enemies, and this is where I wanted to wait and really talk about the combat.
Okay.
So the combat in this is extremely different. You remember possibly from earlier Assassin's Creeds, you would just sort of wait to parry, like
Yeah.
that was the
Yep.
functional strategy, you
Yep.
know? That's not really the case anymore. So the way it works is you have like a stance. You have like an attack stance. You hit one button and you put your shield up and you have an attack stance. And you can lock on to enemies or not, to give you, more like better positioning so you can like strafe and stuff. But you go into this attack stance and that slows you down, but keeps your shield up. And so as long as you're not actively attacking, you will block.
Gotcha.
And then you have a dash, which is the primary means of defense. You generally want to dash enemy attacks. There is also a parry, but it's in its current state, and I actually talked to developers about if they were going to change this at all. In this current state, it's nearly useless.
Really?
It's really hard to time,
Gotcha.
mainly because there's no indication that an enemy's attacking. So it's a very short action. The length of the parry is very short. So if an enemy, for example, has a long swing up time, you can't really, it's very difficult to judge when you should parry.
Right.
And in a lot of cases where you are locked onto a character, your character model can actually block their character model, which blocks the animation, which makes it impossible to see that their attack is coming.
I mean, so it's kind of like with any other third-person brawler type game like this, where like the Dark Souls, it's not going to tell you when you should parry, but you kind of learn from what weapon they're using and what their attack animation.
What I would argue about that is that Dark Souls does it in a very particular way with very deliberate attack patterns. Like, okay, this enemy has like these 3 attack patterns, and that's how he operates. Period. Whereas this, they're just people fighting. It seems like their movements are a little more organic, and to that extent, it's less. It seems like kind of a crapshoot trying to figure out when you should be parrying.
Right. Does it depend on maybe the weapon that they're using too? Or?
But that's the thing. I have no idea.
Right.
I don't, in my current state, and this might change as I play, I don't know if like certain weapons are slower, if it's always the same point in their attack that you should parry.
Yeah.
If it changes depending on their size or their enemy type or blah, blah, blah. Like there's too many variables at this point, to leave that up to the player to just figure it out, I feel like. But yeah, so dodging is your optimal means of defense. And as far as your offense capabilities, like you have a ton of weapons. You have like your sword, your kind of standard sword. You have a heavy weapon, which can be the mace. It can be a spear, a whole bunch of other things. Then you have your bow and arrow, which has multiple firing shots. You can do like a burst shot where you have a whole bunch of arrows and you shoot them almost like an arrow shotgun.
Okay.
Or you have like a long precision shot, a couple others. And then you have your shield. and then you have your hidden blade, and it's just tools on tools on tools. And
So
then
how many weapons can you carry around at once?
so you can carry, from what I remember, you can carry your sword and your shield, and then your heavy weapon, your bow and arrow, and then like your hidden blade, and I think one throwable weapon, like throwing knives or
you have
darts
a
or
lot
stuff.
of options.
You have a lot of options, yeah. And then the combat, like as far as your offensive capabilities, it seems relatively straightforward. So you have a light attack. You have with these are with your just sort of primary melee weapons, whether the sword or the heavy weapon. You have a light attack. You have a heavy attack. You can charge the heavy attack to do some of these animated takedowns we've been seeing.
Yeah.
Or
Which
you
look really cool.
yeah, or you can get. I don't know if there's a difference between these animated takedowns, but you can do an even greater, it seems like, animated takedown if you do R1 and R2 at the same time. You
gotcha.
charge up a meter in combat, and when the meter reaches full, it's basically like an insta kill.
Yeah.
I don't know. Now this is a whole nother conversation, but we have learned that Assassin's Creed has RPG elements, and I don't know if like those stats come into play with the takedowns, but yeah. So yeah, that's about wraps it up here with Assassin's Creed.
Rescued the kid.
And yeah, it was good. It'll be interesting to see how its true scale.
Yeah. I mean, just this one area looked pretty, detailed and open and huge. I'm actually pretty impressed. That's probably the most impressive thing from this demo for me is just how big and detailed and cool looking the areas are. So
yeah, coming into this, I wasn't super optimistic, but coming out of this demo now, my opinion has changed radically, and I'm actually really excited for it. So,
cool.
all right, so this is Nick, that's Mike for EGM Now, and thanks for joining us.